Hello and welcome to the Tried It podcast, your proven pathway to a better copywriting business. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Nicole.
And we are here today to follow up on our last episode. We're going to be talking about the book Smart Brevity by Jim Vanderhey, Mike Allen, and Roy Schwartz. In our last episode, which you'll want to listen to before diving into this episode, we went through our thoughts after having read Smart Brevity, discussed our takeaways, and decided on our implementation points. Because on the Tried It podcast, we don't just read books about copywriting, we read them and then we apply the things we've learned to our own copywriting businesses and to our client work. So that's what we are going to be talking about today. Maybe you would like to start, Nicole, and share what your 3 implementation goals were from the Smart Brevity book and let us know how you got on with them.
Sure. I just want to say one thing before I share. Please, this is not a replacement for buying the book. We highly recommend you buy the book. It's a great read.
Point.
And like Sarah and I say on almost every episode, these are our insights. These are our takeaways. I'm sure they can help you, but you'll probably have your own takeaways as well. So we highly recommend reading the books.
Definitely. You'll get different things out of them than we've got out of them.
Yeah.
And the podcast isn't a substitute for reading the books. It's kind of a guided accompaniment to reading books about copywriting. So I will drop the link to Smart Brevity in the show notes and you can buy it there. But yeah, back to you, Nicole. Take it away.
Yeah, sure. So my 3 implementation tasks from last week, I wanted to apply this to a client project. I wanted to apply it to a project that I was working on for the Tried It podcast, which is, I think by the time they listen to it, it should be live. So maybe I can mention it. So basically it's the landing page for our upcoming membership. And I also wanted to apply it to some of my own LinkedIn posts.
Right.
So
perhaps we could do a tiny recap of the Smart Brevity format just to refresh people's minds. So just to remind you about what Smart Brevity is, it's a communication style developed by the authors, kind of drawing on their background in journalism. And they say it's a kind of revolutionary communication method that'll help you to get your message across to everybody, and helps you to say more with less. Smart Brevity. They preach not dumbing down your message, but condensing it into kind of a short, punchy format that'll help you to kind of stand out in this crowded space where everybody is over communicating. Their format is essentially a short title that gives the one takeaway that you want people to learn, a kind of punchy first sentence that develops on that title, a why it matters section that broadens out the context of the news that you've just shared. And then at that point, you give the reader the option to go deeper, where you can give links where they can go and read more about the topic if they choose. So they say that you can use Smart Brevity in many places, including in traditional news media, also in company emails, in presentations. So you're thinking about what you need your listener or your reader to know and how to deliver it to them in this punchy format that will help them to understand it with the least amount of time and effort spent possible on their behalf. So, Nicole, you said that you were applying Smart Brevity to your work. How did you get on with it?
So, just some background. I'm a copywriter for the clean tech space. So I deal a lot with energy companies and that kind of stuff. So it's very complicated technology and energy-related concepts that are very difficult to convey. So I actually found the formula very helpful, and I found my clients were quite receptive to it. So I applied it to 2 LinkedIn posts, and
Right.
not only did the client approve the posts, usually there's quite a lot of back and forth because again, we're explaining very, very complicated concepts. Not only was there a very smooth editing process, but the posts actually performed very well, which I thought was interesting.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I don't know if I can link them in the show notes. We can talk about that afterwards. But I can tell you that the one had, for this particular company, there isn't an insane amount of engagement. Again, I think it's something very niche. They deal with like energy for buildings and like cooling buildings. Like it's very niche, very specific, kind of sexy, but not very sexy. You know what I mean? Like the engagement isn't explosive, but like the one post had 450, I think it was 452 impressions. And it was a noticeable jump. And it was just an article that I found on something to do with heat waves or something like that. I used the format, the punchy, as Sarah said, the punchy intro, building on that slightly. And then I used, which was interesting and unusual for our posts, so for this particular brand, and on LinkedIn, I used like these two subheadings with like why it matters and something else. And it performed really well. And the other thing that made me think of is, even if I don't continue using this, I think it's a really helpful format for structuring your thoughts. Like, again, coming back to like specifically what I do, where often I'm struggling, like if you take something like, lately I've been writing a lot about VPPs, which are virtual power plants. And I won't go into this here. Suffice to say that it's super, super complicated. And using this structure helped me. Like it helped me like structure like, okay, what am I actually trying to say? How can I expand on that? And then what does it matter? And like what more do people need to know? So it helped me take a step back. It helped me understand what I want to communicate, how I want to communicate, and like why it matters for my target audience. So I really liked it. That was the first. So I would say that was a success. And I think I mentioned in our last episode as well that I had applied this before to something called an RFI, a request for information, which was an email for the same client. And it also did very well. Yeah, it did very well. The client liked it. And I think it really conveyed the message very, very effectively. So that's my update on that. My second implementation task was to apply it to some copy for the Tried It podcast. And I failed there. And I think
in what way?
I'm being honest. You got to give me some credit for that. It felt restrictive, and I'm working on a landing page, and it didn't feel like a natural way to deliver information. And it's not how I write. Like it's not a natural way. Like I think it works in my opinion, and I'd love to hear your thoughts Sarah, but I think it works really well when you're trying to convey very complicated or newsworthy information clearly. I don't think it works well for creativity or necessarily for sales or where you need a bit more finessing. I just didn't think it worked. And I struggle to imagine, like when I write copy, I think about what I'm trying to say, which I guess is the starting point of this framework. I think about what I'm trying to say, but I also think about like how a reader is going to experience the page. And I don't think like punchy headline, expand on punchy headline and help them go deeper. It's enough. Like I think there are other stages that happen. Maybe I'm missing something. Again, I'd love to hear from you, Sarah, but that was my experience. And then my other implementation task was to apply to my own work. I did that only this morning, to be honest. Again, because, and the reason, if you look at my LinkedIn posts, I write in a very specific style. I want to say more story driven, maybe inappropriate. Like I put a lot of myself into my posts. This formulaic format doesn't really work for me. Like it felt robotic. It felt almost AI driven. I also ran it through like you can demo the Smart Brevity tool. I ran it through that. And like what it kind of spat out at me, it was like, it didn't feel like me, even though I do think it communicated a clear idea. So that's what I can tell you. And in terms of like, will I continue using this? So here's what I think. I think that more and more I see with my clients, specifically in the energy space, they want very clear, succinct communication. Like one of my clients, another client, in one of the blog briefs, they actually wrote, our target audience does not have time to read. They wrote this, and it's like the first time I've ever seen it in a brief. They were like, they do not have time to read. They need super complicated stuff explained very simple in as few words as possible. So I was like, this is smart brevity. I was like, ding, ding, ding.
When you talk about your energy clients' communication, is that communication within their own company or them kind of communicating in a sort of marketing way to their customers or potential customers?
I don't know if I understood exactly what you're saying, but you mean how they communicate internally or the message, how they want their messages to be communicated externally?
Yes. I mean, yes, exactly. Yeah.
So internally, I don't know. But I know for like if I look at their content on their website and also the stuff that I'm doing, it's very, I want to say bare bones. It's very not a style that comes natural to me. It's very, I think Smart Brevity would be great for them. But if that answers your question.
Yes.
And I think, again, I come back to my first point. Yeah, sorry. I'll come back to my first point of like, I really think this is a great structure for, and again, I would love to hear what you have to say, Sarah, but for like very complicated, and again, clean tech particularly, because you're worried about like, trying to get complicated concepts across very clearly, respecting the audience and respecting like what they know and what they need to know. So I think it's an efficient way to communicate, but I definitely won't use it for like other projects of mine. Like I'm working on some stuff on the side, and our landing page for the podcast and also my own LinkedIn posts. It doesn't feel like me. So those are my updates. Sarah, I would love to hear from you because I know you had some fascinating tasks. I've been thinking about them since we had our last episode. So I'd love to hear.
I will turn to my implementation points in a sec. I was just thinking about one of the things that you said. It's interesting that you hypothesize that perhaps there's a natural appeal of Smart Brevity for your energy clients, that it helps them to communicate information for these people who are time stretched. And Smart Brevity is definitely a format that allows you to do that. That kind of goes against your personal sense of having this more personality-driven copywriting with this flavor that you bring into talking about clean tech. Do you think clean tech companies, in the way that they communicate now, they're kind of striving for smart brevity and not getting there?
That's a fascinating question. That's actually what I wrote about this morning with my kind of Smart Brevity inspired post, is that I think clean tech companies have a huge problem when it comes to communication. And that's why I think they need Smart Brevity, because I think that they're aiming for something else, but they need to educate their market. And I think that Smart Brevity is one of the best ways to do it because it is no fluff, right? Mm-hmm. There's like, what is in it for me? What is this technology about? Why do I need to care? Like, I will say that a while ago, I think last year, I wrote website copy for a big energy company. And one of the reasons they came to me was because of like my natural way of writing, which is not Smart Brevity. It's much more creative. And I've been working with them on and off for about a year. And one of the reasons they keep coming back is for this creative flavor, which is super interesting. They deal with like very big energy storage in front of the meter. So it's a different target audience and it's a different way of communicating. I feel like I lost your train of thought. I'm sorry. But yeah,
it's very interesting. I wonder if there's a meeting point somewhere in between. Here's the Smart Brevity format with the news you absolutely need to know, but injecting a little bit more of your personality-driven copywriting in there too. So it's not just here's some news you need to know. It's like it's actually a fun reading experience too. That kind of 50% of each.
Yeah. Like, I think you make a very good point. Like, I think maybe there is a way to marry the two. So like you focus, like your starting point is the person who's reading this and what they need to know, but it's written in a way that's not AI. Like, and when I say it's not AI, I mean, it's not like robotic and like cold, because I find like, so you inject a bit of the personality, but you don't go into like these stories that are, even though like, as I said in the last episode, like it kills me a bit because my natural way of writing is to be maybe verbose. I don't know what the word would be, but like, I'm not a direct communicator. I'm not, as you can probably hear.
Well, I would mention to our listeners that if they want to see more of your writing, they should definitely follow you on LinkedIn, and that link should be in the show notes. So then you can see Nicole's style of writing, and I'll also link the post for her Smart Brevity, the link for her Smart Brevity style post, so you can compare the two, compare and contrast a little, dear listener.
I will just say one more thing before we move on to you, Sarah, because I'm dying to hear about your findings. I will just say that I felt very bad sharing that post this morning, and I allowed myself to share it because I was like, I'm sharing this in the name of the experiment, because I love experiments. I really do. But it felt like not like me. It honestly felt not like me. Like, it's not how I would write. It's not how I approach it. And the interesting thing is, maybe I can share this as well. Like, I have in the document how I started writing it, like where I started, which is like with a story, and then where it ended up, which is like a cold fact. Like, it's a one-liner cold fact. It's also, it felt like something that could go in anybody's profile. It's not Nicole.
Yeah. I was just going to say something that you could fit on a tombstone.
But yeah, exactly. Totally. Exactly. So yes, that's my summary. But enough talking from me. Sarah, please. I'm dying to hear what you have to say.
I will pass the mic over to me. Perhaps, no pressure, Nicole, but maybe it would be interesting for our listeners if you shared that document with the evolution of your post from top to cold bottom.
No problem. I would be happy to.
Okay, so over to me with my implementation points. So I set myself the goal of writing an email to my list in the Smart Brevity format, a blog post and accompanying LinkedIn post in the Smart Brevity format, and then the sort of experiment of, can I run my company as a Smart Brevity company for a week? I'm going to cover the first two kind of in the same breath of writing a newsletter and a blog post, because I had similar experiences with both, regardless of the different formats. I think that you and I perhaps found the same thing, Nicole. And just for our listeners here, we don't really talk about how the experiments go in our communication. We save it for recording now. So it's interesting that we both came away with the same reflections. My writing style is different to yours, but I found it very difficult to write in this Smart Brevity style. And I was actually surprised at how difficult I found it, because normally as a copywriter, you sell yourself on the ability to pick up nuances in your client's tone of voice or their own branding, and that you can kind of just slip gently into that mold. And to be fair, when I write blog posts and I write emails for my list, I'm using my own voice. It's not like I'm writing from a client. People who are reading it know, hopefully, it was written by Sarah. So perhaps because the writing was more personal to me, I found it uncomfortable and difficult. And it also took me a lot longer to write than usual, even though it was shorter, the end result was shorter, because the writing felt clunky. It was hard for me to put my Smart Brevity thinking cap on. I will say, like you, Nicole, it made me really drill down to what is my actual message here? What is the one takeaway that I want somebody reading this to retain? And I think that that's a really useful thing to have in mind. No matter what kind of writing you're doing, you should have in mind, what am I doing here? But following it up with the Smart Brevity format, I really weighed every word very carefully. And I don't know if the end result was worth the angst. Because when I'm reading it, it sounds cold and calculating. The emails already got out to my list, but I will include the links to the blog post that I wrote, plus another blog post that's more typical of my style. So if you're interested, you can have a look and see the difference. But it just came across as a bit cold. And I know in Smart Brevity they say you can add personality in there, but I was like, how? If every single word needs to be weighed up, where does the personality come in? And I found it, for example, with the headline. So my blog post, my own personal blog, I write about podcasting. And I decided that the Smart Brevity format would be useful for sharing newsworthy things. So I found an article that I really loved about what podcasting does for your brain. And within that article, there was an interesting update it was a study about video podcasting. Specifically, this was more to do with narrative podcasts, which is by no means, the entire podcasting world. It's a subsection thereof. But in the study, they found that participants were more engaged in audio-only content as opposed to consuming the same story in an audio-video format. So I use this to write a blog post to explain why your podcast doesn't have to have video, and what the benefits of an audio-only podcast are. So that was kind of the message of it. And I wanted the takeaway to help my readers, to relieve them of this pressure of, oh God, if I'm starting a podcast, I have to have a video. Actually, no, you don't. That was the news. But the headline was, audio beats video for engagement. And I spent so long on that, partly constrained by they have a whole chapter on headlines in Smart Brevity where they talk about, words of one syllable are better. And I was really trying to find what the best verb is. And in the end, I used their Axios tool, and it came up with beats. So I was quite happy with that because I was going to go with a slightly different direction. And when their tool suggested beats, I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. But the rest of the blog post to me reads as a bit cold. And I don't think that I will keep it as the style of posts on my blog. And also writing a LinkedIn post about it was a challenge for me because with the LinkedIn post, I was trying to communicate several pieces of information. One of them pieces of information was this news about audio versus video. One was about I've got a new blog post out, and one was about, by the way, this blog post is in a slightly different format. Have you heard of Smart Brevity? What do you think of it? So that's 3 things in one LinkedIn post, which I probably could have done easier in my normal way of posting on LinkedIn, which is slightly more conversational. But trying to squeeze all of that into Smart Brevity, it was like trying to put on a corset, I was bursting out of it.
How did the post perform?
The post performed quite well, which is partly because my LinkedIn connections are mostly or certainly the connections that interact with me most are in podcasting, and there are very strong opinions in both directions about video podcasting. So posting about video podcasting generally is an okay way to get engagement on LinkedIn. There was no comments at all about the style of blog posts. It just, a couple of people jumped on there and had a really long conversation on my comments thread about the merits of video podcasting, which is good for me, It boosts my my own impressions rate and so on, and I got new connections from it. But and nobody was like, excellent post, Sarah. Right. As in, the style of writing or whatever.
Right.
So that was a very non-Smart Brevity way of talking about my first 2 implementation goals.
I have also another question. And your newsletter, like, did you see a change in opens, click-through rates, anything like that?
No, I would say it performed about the same as my standard newsletters do. It's, again, I have the same experience of really weighing up the title, which was also the subject line, but I don't think that translated into a higher open rate. I would say not worth the effort.
Yeah. It's interesting how we both ended up with a similar-ish conclusion,
I think that it's a really clever, Smart Brevity is a really clever way of sharing news.
Yeah.
But not everything that you share is newsworthy. But it's still worth sharing without it being newsworthy. As we talked about in the previous episode, sometimes you do just want a story and you want to stay in touch with your audience, with your email subscribers or whoever it is in a way that's meaningful, but not sort of drop everything and learn this piece of information.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what all this kind of makes me think is, like, I'm wondering if maybe this kind of formula would have made more sense in the days before AI and or the proliferation of AI. And I'll explain what I mean. I'm seeing a lot, like on my LinkedIn feed, I'm seeing a lot of posts from writers. How do I write something without using AI, without making it seem like it's written by AI? Because now almost all content sounds like AI. And like, if you think of the days before AI, this would have been a very novel, succinct way of writing. But now it just kind of like blends in. Like, what put me off what I wrote with this formula was that to me it sounded like AI, and I didn't use AI. Like I didn't use, like, I ran it through the Axios thing, but I ultimately used my own stuff. And I'm wondering if, because of where we are with content, that maybe people are craving more of the story, of the real, of the, you know what I mean? What do you think, Sarah?
I agree with what you're saying. I can see how smart brevity can come across as being quite dry. And that's also slightly what AI is pushing towards too. I don't think all the time. I think AI picks up on weird points of personality and decides to include that. Like, I've probably mentioned this before. AI uses so many adverbs, and that's kind of a copywriting rule to avoid adverbs unless they're necessary. And AI is just like, take another adverb. So yeah, I think that I go back to my point of, it's a good way of sharing news, but I don't think it's the be all and end all of communication.
Right.
I want to give us a personal shout out here, because the other point that I had that I thought about as I was writing in the Smart Brevity format was, it's harder to write in than you think it's going to be, or at least that was my personal experience. Perhaps there are copywriters out there that heard of Smart Brevity, read the book and started writing and it was fine. Let us know. Would love to hear it if that's the case.
Please,
but for me,
please do.
The implementation of the Smart Brevity format was a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. I'd massively underestimated it. And I don't think I would have learned that unless I'd have tried it. And ironically, if a client had said to me, oh, by the way, our in-house style is Smart Brevity, you can do that, right? I would have said, sure, definitely. And then I would have gone away and Googled it. Now, having written in Smart Brevity format, I am less confident of my ability. So if a client said it to me now, even though I've practiced Smart Brevity, I would probably be like, maybe I'm not the writer for you.
I think you make so many good points. First of all, please, if you're listening, and I agree with Sarah, and you're a copywriter and you're using this, please let us know what we missed, like what light we didn't see. Like I also, it baffles me.
I'm kind of dunking on our own implementation, because the point I'm making is implementing is bad and will lose you clients. And that's not what I mean. I got something out of implementing that I wouldn't have got otherwise. That's what you need to know, children.
I also have to say that, like, I must be honest, like, for my people, my clients, I do think there's value. And I do think that I could probably, not for website copy, but I do think for LinkedIn and for blog posts in the energy space, I do think this is the way to go. I must be honest. Like, maybe a little bit more friendly version. My last question for you, Sarah, is who, like, before I hear your final implementation task, who would you recommend use this?
Good question. I can see what you're saying about how it's really adept to the clients that you work with. I would say, from my experience as a freelancer and as somebody who used to be traditionally employed, I would recommend learning Smart Brevity to improve internal communications in a large organization. There are probably other use cases. But from my personal experience, that's who I would recommend it to. And actually, that's something that they mention in the Smart Brevity book. And on those points, I really agree with them. Emails and Slack and whatever kinds of other communication used within a company are all good. They probably all have their place, but you can drown out a message or have people who are not in the loop through poor communication. Whereas if you master the skill of being able to write a succinct email that punches home a message, I think in the corporate world, that's a skill that is uncommon and will make you stand out and could potentially help advance you in your career. So I would recommend to people in that kind of space, or if you know somebody like that, tell them about Smart Brevity. Maybe they can use the software. Maybe they'll figure it out by themselves because they're smarter than I am. You asked me in the last episode what I thought about Axios News. And I found reading the news on their website to be a little bit soulless. And maybe you might think that the news doesn't have to have a soul. I'm coming from the perspective of somebody who follows the news quite closely through podcasts and also through the BBC News app. Maybe you like the BBC, maybe you don't. I read a lot of what the BBC writes. I mean, I'm a British passport holder. So what can I say? And so I have to say I'm very habituated to their format, and the BBC delivers news fairly succinctly, but there is a bit more space for context and for explanation just in the form of paragraphs rather than this sort of what it is, why it matters, the big picture. So I didn't like the sort of this almost bulletin style article. I would say also I found some articles on their website to be not 100% Smart Brevity, but I know that their argument is, guardrails, sorry, guidelines, not guardrails. Right. But I went again on this on their website this morning to see if my opinion had changed. And there's one article which is a slightly longer one because it's quite a complicated topic. And I have to say, I do really love the headline. It's about George Clooney's call out of Joe Biden, saying that Joe Biden should step down as the Democratic nominee. And their headline is George Clooney juices Dems rebellion against Biden. And I love the verb juice there. I think that's actually very clever. And that's where I can see them using a bit more personality that perhaps the BBC wouldn't say. I don't think that would be in their house style. Right. So will it be my source of news going forward? No. Will it be somewhere I go to for creative inspiration from time to time? Probably yes. Because, like I said, I just think that word choice of juices is very clever in this context.
Yeah, I agree. And like building on what you've just said, I can think of another use case, like besides the news, where I think copywriters could actually use this. I think this is, I think this could be good scaffolding. Like I think you could use it as your skeleton, like to set up what you want to say, right? Like this is like the message. Like this is the I'm going to catch you. I'm going to the muscular tease. I'm going to build on that with a slightly more, and then these are the other sections, like taking the reader on this journey. So if that's your scaffolding or your skeleton, you add clothing, right? And then from there you add the color. So I don't think it needs to be structured in the same way, but it really helps focus you, which takes me back to Anne Henley, with, like her GPS and like where you want to go with the message and the writing. And I think it could be a way of setting up a piece, if that makes sense. And then from there you would add the color, you would add more story, you would maybe play, but it keeps you very structured and focused, especially that first line. Like, what do I want to say? What is the message? What is the punchline?
That's an interesting way of thinking about it, that perhaps you could Smart Brevity your headline and your lead, and add the personality in the same text, but just perhaps not there.
Right. Right. So Sarah, can you tell us a bit more about your third and final fascinating implementation task?
Yes. So, I also set myself the challenge of running my own business as a Smart Brevity-style company, which is something that they discuss, in their book, that Smart Brevity is not just a way of sharing news or writing emails. It's a whole philosophy which encompasses being an authority in your subject area, being honest and transparent in your communication. I would say I tried hard to do it, and I think that these are good goals to have. I don't know if I necessarily achieved them. I think that honesty in communication as a freelancer is important. So one instance in which it was quite useful was that a client of mine asked for a quote for a project, and I gave them a quote. And then they replied back and said, "This quote seems a bit high. Could you explain why you quoted this amount?" And I sat on the email for maybe 2 hours or so because I wanted to really think through what I was saying. And I slightly smart brevitied the email. I didn't do their sort of headlines or whatever. But one of their main tenant is brevity is confidence, length is fear. And my gut instinct in writing that email was, obviously I justified the price point. There are a few reasons why I quoted higher for this particular project. Not to go into too much detail, but this was actually translation work because I also do translation from French to English. And the work was shorter than I've previously done for them, but I quoted more because it relied a lot on punchy, clever headlines, which are incredibly difficult to translate. And it requires a lot of thought, whereas sometimes when you're translating a long text, you've got space to include ideas, to develop them. In a headline, you don't have space. So that's why I quoted higher for this project. And in the email that I wrote about the quote, I explained it to them succinctly. And my gut instinct was, I need to end this sentence with something nice or something to soften the message. That's why it took me quite a long time to write the email, because I was battling this instinct of say something nice. And in the end, I didn't, because brevity is confidence, length is fear. So I sent an email justifying my price point, and I rounded out the email with, "Let me know if there are any questions," rather than, "Hope that's all okay for you guys. Tell me, what do you think? Or perhaps if I quote this price, then maybe we could do a deal down the road." No, cut all of that out. I stuck to my guns on the price.
Amazing.
And very long story short, they accepted it. So in that case, I think that there was a smart brevity element of both honesty, also being the authority. You know, I am the translator who knows how to do this project. I don't need to fall back on niceties. As I was going through that process as well, it occurred to me, and this is a point that we haven't discussed in any of the podcasts yet, but you and I are both women, and women communicate differently to men.
Right.
And the authors of Smart Brevity are all men. This thought only occurred to me when I was sat in this thinking space, wondering about the email I was about to send.
That's a very, very good point. That's a very good point.
It's quite nuanced, because women, I think, I'm going to talk in broad terms here, and I'm not an expert on gender politics or anything like that, and people can also identify as many genders, but speaking through the lens of I am a woman, I think women are socialized to be nicer, and niceties involves things like softening sentences. It also involves things that they talk about in Smart Brevity, like the chat at meetings, which they see as time wasting, but might through another lens be relationship building, because perhaps it's actually useful to know that Sandra in accounting loves water skiing. So next time you need to, get your expense travel receipts done quickly, you can drop in something about water skiing, and, it just keeps those relationships alive. And maybe as men, the authors of Smart Brevity either they don't value it or they don't see the need for it at all and consider it irrelevant,
That's a fascinating take. Like, I didn't see that. But, and as you said, like, I'm also not an expert on gender politics, but that's a really good point. Because, like, if I compare, like, me and my husband, he's a lawyer, and, like, how he communicates and how I communicate, and I've helped him, like, I'm in Israel, so he writes stuff in Hebrew, and I've helped him with some translation. And when I translate some legal stuff, like, it's legal, but there's also another level. There's another level of communicating that gets missed sometimes. And I think it's because he's a man. Like, he doesn't see the forcefulness, how direct he is, how sharp it is. Like, it's very interesting what you're saying.
I personally start out almost every email to clients or, whoever with professional contacts with a sentence along the lines of, hope you're doing well, or something like that. And I know that people either let their eyes gloss over that, maybe some people hate it, some people don't, but I can't not have it. And in Smart Brevity, that first line is where you do the news punch, and I'm using my news punch to say, hope you're doing okay. But it really made me reflect. I feel a compulsion to do it, but just because I feel a compulsion, is it the right thing to do? But I personally put a lot of weight on relationships. And as a small business owner, relationships do really matter, because your clients might be coming back to you. Obviously, you do good work, but they know you. Right. And if they're hiring a totally unknown writer to do the same work, it's a gamble, because maybe that writer's better or maybe they're not, but they know you, and the relationship that they have with you is as important as the work you do, because you're showing a level of investment. I don't know if that made sense what I said, but
no, it does. And I have an example to build on that. I received an email this morning from a prospective client in the energy space, and it was a female head of marketing, and she did two things in this email which are against, in some ways, the Smart Brevity format, but made me smile. So she wrote her email, and she didn't end with thanks or whatever. She wrote, have a nice day. And then she wrote her name, which I know it's small.
I do that too.
But it made me smile. It made me smile. Made me smile.
I'm queen of have a great day.
But that's lovely.
Most of the time, people don't have great days. Not every day is a great day.
But I thought it was really nice. It was a nice touch. And then also, she had a signature with, like, the company logos and all that kind of stuff. And then she had a PS that said, my working hours may differ to yours, so please don't feel obliged to respond immediately. I don't know. I just really like that. Like, it's a short sentence, but it made me smile. And I think
I like it too.
Yeah, my working hours may differ to yours.
Know if it's smart. I don't know if it's Smart Brevity or not, but I am, again, I'm somebody who invests in these kinds of relationships, because the relationships are my livelihood. Right. They help me to, like, do things I enjoy, such as sleep in an apartment and eat food. And I guess I express the value of these relationships through things like, I hope you're well, have a great day. So I think in the example I referred to before of this email where I was talking about the quote and responding to questioning about the quote, I really liked the confidence that Smart Brevity gave me to just say, here's the reason, here's the explanation behind this quote, full stop, rather than diluting that message with niceties. But I don't think that I'll ever remove niceties from my communication vocabulary.
Yeah. No, I think you summed it up very, very beautifully.
Yeah, it also this is slightly tangential, but in the book of Smart Brevity, they include examples of well, here's what communication looks like before Smart Brevity, and here's what it looks like after Smart Brevity. And one of those particular examples was a hypothetical example of a kid's birthday party changing venues, and they included an email before and after, or I can't remember if it was an email or not. But I remember reading it and thinking, if I got this email, I'd be like, okay, Dylan's mum is kind of full of herself, like breaking news on Dylan's birthday party changes location. Because from the point of view of the writers of Smart Brevity, it's like the best thing for your reader or whoever is to just tell them the information. Whereas I think I'm coming from the perspective of, okay, people need to know this information. You need to keep those relationships going. And I recognize that my kid's birthday party isn't the most important thing in your entire world or whatever. So writing that email, perhaps I would, after having read Smart Brevity, I would move it along the scale a little bit more towards Smart Brevity. But I don't think that I could ever drop the verbiage of hope you're well, apologies for the location change, there's been a few balls going in the air, here's where we're at now, right. Dylan's birthday party, blah, 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 blah. And I know, had I got the Smart Brevity email, I would be like, not looking forward to this.
I think, and I am not budging from this, I think that it's a great formula to use like as a structure. Like, let's say I'm Dylan's mom, right? I've got to announce, like, let people know that the party's moved, I don't know, rain, whatever. Okay. And like, I have like tons of stuff to communicate. So I'm not sure where to start. So I sit down and I make like my punchy headline. What's the news? The news is that the party has moved. Catch us here. And then I build the message. This is very cold. This has no soul. I then take this, but I have like the structure, right? And then from there, I make it more creative, like, if that makes sense. Like
so do you think in your capacity as Dylan's mum, emailing mums of Dylan's friends, you start out that email saying Dylan's party has changed location, new address is blah, 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 and then you carry on with the message where it's like, sorry for the inconvenience, for several reasons, thanks so much for playing along, blah blah blah. Is that how you would send that email, Dylan's mum?
Like I tend to like to push boundaries in terms of creativity and language. So I don't know, but I do know that in my experience when trying to be creative with writing, that sometimes messages get lost. And what I like about this structure is that it helps you hold on to the core of what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
And so I don't know exactly how I would do it, but I know that like having at the top of the page, this is the news. Like maybe I would start off with a joke, but a joke that like links somehow like that to the news, or the joke is around the news, or something is around that core idea. So I'm not like talking about something else. And then I don't know if that makes sense, but I see it a lot. And it happens to me a lot actually when I get carried away with writing. And then by the time I've written the piece, it's like, what is the actual main message? And the other thing I wanted to bring up quickly is this is interesting when you compare it to story brand, the upgrade, because that's all about celebrating the story, celebrating how we build stories and the development of stories. So this kind of flies in the face of that.
I think that I will take from Smart Brevity that you need to hold on to the core message, as you said, Nicole, but I don't think that you need to go 100% into Smart Brevity to be able to communicate a message clearly.
I agree. That was a very Smart Brevity way of saying it.
Okay. So now that we have shared our implementation points from the Smart Brevity book, I think that it would be interesting for our listeners to know that if they sign up for the membership, they're going to see some Smart Brevity influences in our newsletter. Yes, yeah.
Well, one of our values at the Tried It podcast is transparency. So we're transparent about things we're trying and also our processes. And we have launched the Tried It membership, Tried It podcast membership, which is a place to grow as a copywriter in 13 minutes or less a week. And the idea is basically that every week you get this really concise, very actionable email where you get an opportunity every week to work on your skills as a copywriter. And the beauty of it is all this is based on the books that we're reading. So, I know how it is. We all have these books or these courses the courses we're signed up for, the books we mean to read, but we never get to. The idea is that this book is your almost like cheat sheet, but not that you don't need to read the books, with stuff that we've taken out from these books, with our insights and takeaways, and exercises and opportunities to really hone your skills and exercise your skills in a very practical way. And there are all sorts of other things that we include as well. Like we include challenges on how to find a client and inspiration and things like that. And it's really the focus is it's a very concentrated, like a shot of vitamin C to grow your business in 13 minutes, as I said, or less a week. So that every week you see some small progress, because it's all about consistency and about going over all the great things that the great copywriters, maybe even someone like Taylor Swift, has said or done. Anything else to add, Sarah? I'm sure I've missed some stuff.
I would say all of those things are included in the membership. We also include access to our own email inboxes. So if, for example, you sign up for the newsletter and we send an exercise, you can email it to us and either Nicole or I will reply with our thoughts on how you did on that exercise. So you're also getting feedback from us too. And the last thing is that we're also, for members of the Tried It podcast, you are not only can you vote on what book that we're going to read next as part of the podcast, your vote will be given additional weighting as a member to thank you. So if there's a book that you have in mind that you've already bought, that you want to buy, suggest it over to us and we'll count it up with, I guess, kind of a democracy, except we favor some people over others. Is that democracy? It doesn't matter. You can help pick the next book of the Tried It podcast. So you're kind of like a shareholder in the podcast as a member. And last thing is there will be at some point bonus episodes of the Tried It podcast that you will only be able to receive as a member of the podcast. They are for devoted listeners only. So those are all the things you get out of the Tried It membership. I would love it if you went along and tried it. You can cancel anytime as well if you feel like it's not for you, but we would love to have you there because it's a sign that you are committing to your copywriting journey, to becoming a better copywriter. And that's what we want to help you with the podcast.
And I want to say that
with all of that,
I want to say that it's like a risk-free commitment, so you can cancel at any time. We would love to have you. We'd be sad to see you go, but we're not gonna. It's not like Hotel California, but
such a lovely place. So I think the only thing that's left to do is to announce the book that we're going to be reading for our next 2 episodes of the Tried It podcast, which will be, whose choice was it again? I can't remember who chose it.
I think it was a mutual
choice.
It's my choice, but okay, it was together.
It was a mutual decision. It's like what everyone says about a breakup. We both decided together. We are going to be reading the mutually chosen book of The Six-Figure Copywriter by Joanna Wiebe. Because on the podcast, we do look at books about copywriting and marketing, but learning how to run your own freelance business is a huge part of copywriting. And we want to work not just on our skills about writing, but our business ownership skills as well. So on the next episode, we will talk about our thoughts on the Six-Figure Copywriter and the things that we learned that we're going to be applying in our own businesses. And I will drop the link for the book below in the show notes so that you can buy it ahead of time if you want to. Yep. So thank you very much for listening. We really, really appreciate you listening to us and sticking with us. And with all of that said, we will don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, and we will see you in the next episode of the Tried It podcast.
Okay.
Bye.